Good evening. Welcome to this evening's session of Harvard Food Systems Initiative. Dear guests, students, faculty, and attendees from around the world, both local and global, I welcome you to today's event where we will do a deep dive on K through 12 food. I am Smita Hanif, and I serve as the chair of Harvard Food Systems Initiative. Harvard Food Systems Initiative is an interdisciplinary platform that was brought together and launched in the fall of this year to bring together our students, faculty, and staff and engage in food systems across multiple disciplines on our campus and beyond. We've had guest lecture series, faculty lecture series, student-led panels, and a truly multidisciplinary approach to how we are thinking about food systems in the local, regional, and global context. Through the Harvard Food Systems Initiative, it's our vision to bring it to the center and create a focus on our campus and beyond by knowledge generation and knowledge exchange, by community engagement events, and by convening. Today's session, we have special guests, Maura Fleischman, who is the CEO of Chef Anne Foundation and progressively advances how children, particularly K through 12 students in the country, are enabled to have healthy, nourishing meals every day. We're also joined by Mellissa Honeywood here, our very local guest from Cambridge Public School District. And Mellissa serves as the Director for Food and Nutrition with the Cambridge Public School District. And Sunny Tang, who is a Food Literacy Program Fellow and a Harvard College student, will talk through about the Food Lab for Kids program that they run. And I have been really pleased with my own attendance in some of these events that Sunny runs. So with that, let me turn it over to Maura, who is the CEO of Chef Anne Foundation, to talk us through the complexity, the structure, the policy, and all the work that they do through the Chef Anne Foundation to advance healthy eating in our country. Maura, over to you.
Thank you so much, Smita. I really appreciate it. It is great to be here. I love talking about school food any time of day, so I take it when I can get it. I think school food has been in the news quite a bit since the pandemic. And so I know that being my career, I've been getting a lot of questions over the last couple of years about school food. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to this group about some of the complexities, some of the opportunities that school food represents in our country. Let's go to the next slide. So my name is Maura Fleischman. As Smita had said, I am the CEO of the Chef Anne Foundation, which is a national nonprofit organization that helps school food programs move from a processed heat and serve model to scratch cooking. We were founded by Chef Ann Cooper, who was a regular mainstream white tablecloth chef back east, and then recruited into school food and in I think early 2000s, and since then proudly holds the flag of renegade lunch lady. So she is someone who has seen what school food what is being served in school food and has really challenged our school food programs in our country to serve healthier, fresher, healthier, whole ingredient based scratch cooked meals. Our programming, that's what our programming does at the Chef Ann Foundation. We provide the grants, the support, the resources for districts that want to and need and want to create that change. We work in every state, and we work with over 13,000 schools, reach about 3.2 million kids across the country. Go to the next one. Just a little bit about how we do this. So we do this through both leadership development and improvement grants. On the leadership development side, we have tools that school food operators can utilize to help understand some of the components of change. School food is a lot more complicated. Mellissa will tell you a little bit about it. It is a lot more complicated than many people think. And it really, in order to create change, it takes a systems approach to really think about it. So we really provide support in the areas of food, finance, facilities, human resources, and marketing. And when you look at a school food program from those lenses, I think you're able to really dial in to what needs to happen in order to be serving the best food. So where we offer some of these types of resources is one, the lunchbox. So if you're ever interested in days and days of reading about school food, go to the lunchbox.org. It was Chef Ann's commitment to the country. It is free to all food service operators, and it houses all of the resources that we use with districts when we work hand in hand with them to create change. We have School Food Institute, which is a personal learning system. So there's courses that you take, there's homework. Actually, Chef Ann herself grades a lot of the homework, unbelievably enough. And this is in compliance with USDA professional development, these 11 courses. And then we have Healthy School Food Pathways, which is kind of one of our newest programs, which is a pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship, and fellowship program that actually works to train new school food operators and existing school food operators on site in kitchens that are doing some pretty great scratch cooking across the country. We also have improvement grants. We have a Get Schools Cooking Grant, which is a 3-year program. Actually, Watertown was one of the districts that got our Get Schools Cooking there in Massachusetts. It's a 3-year program. We work hand in hand with the district to do on-site assessments, provide technical assistance. They get systems grants. It's really our most comprehensive initiative. And we also have salad bars to schools. Salad bars, if anyone has been in a school food program that has salad bars, if you're on the operations side, kind of what you know is if you're not ready to go full steam ahead in scratch cooking, you can start with a salad bar, and it kind of is a microcosm of scratch cooking. So when you operate a salad bar, you have to learn about fresh distribution, fresh storage, fresh prep, and a lot of those learnings can play into the further you get down the road in scratch cooking. So that's a little bit about the programming. We can move on. Here's just a look at the map and where we're at in the different states. And really our work is it's not push based, it's pull based. So, this work is hard, and we'll get to a slide, but it's a lot easier, frankly, to serve a USDA compliant processed chicken nugget, to get it frozen out of the freezer and put it in a heater and put it out on the line than it is to make a chicken strip from scratch using, 6 perishable ingredients and having to manage that through the system. So one of the stipulations in working with us is that we don't really recruit districts. Districts come to us because we have to know that you're committed. And we actually, in most of our bigger grants, we make sure that the superintendents are signing off on the grant and that we're meeting with the superintendents, because they really have to support a school food director that is wanting to create the change. Next slide. So here's a slide that we kind of like to show just to give an understanding of what, where the rubber meets the road with some scratch cooking. So on the left here, you can, pretty much every district I've been in has served some form of chicken nugget. And if you look on the left, you can see what, a lot of the processed chicken nuggets that are served in schools contain. There is a lot of ingredients. There's over 30 ingredients there. There's a lot of ingredients there that, are not needed. There's also, when you get this chicken nugget, all these ingredients are contained in it. So you have no procurement flexibility, meaning that you can't, make better choices for certain ingredients. So if you want a higher quality poultry, you can't make that choice. It comes built in. If you want a, let's just say for some reason, and it's challenging in school food, but let's say you wanted a higher, quality canola oil, and you wanted to make sure you can't make that change. So what we offer and help schools to work towards is something like exchanging that for an oven fried chicken, which is a recipe we have on the lunchbox that a lot of districts implement. And this only has 8 ingredients in it. And while there is still not a lot of money in the reimbursement rate, which we'll get to, still districts are very, harbored by a low reimbursement rate. They still, if the power of procurement is back in their hands, they have choices they can make that affect the health of the end product and also can affect change in the environmental impacts of what they're buying. Next slide. So a lot of people, when I talk about scratch cooking is kind of this simple term, right? Everyone has their idea. Like, I say, what do people say? What do you do? I say, help schools do more scratch cooking. And they say, oh, that's nice. That's great. And it is great. And we all kind of think about, oh, well, that's good. I go home, I make a meal. It's great. It's a nice to have. But in reality, I think scratch cooking, in schools and from a greater perspective in institutional food, is really important for us to consider what it's connected to. So one, it's nutrition. There are baseline guidelines that the USDA puts out. You have to meet sodium regs, you have to meet whole grain regs, you have to meet certain saturated fat regulations. But one thing that they don't regulate is something like fiber, right? So fiber is not regulated through any of the school. And when you ultra process food, you strip out the fiber from the food. So when you're able to increase the quality of the ingredients in your food, when you're able to to kind of keep intact some of that whole ingredient based production, you're able to really affect the nutritional levels of the food. You're also able, as I talked about, you're also able to affect change on the environmental side, on the planet side. You're able to make better choices on the animal protein that you choose, what farms it's coming from, some of the produce, a lot of your dairy. There's a lot of procurement choices, even though you are constricted by the reimbursement rate. There's a lot of things that you can do. And then, we have the equity issue, right? So our country has a history of looking at looking at kind of hunger programs from a caloric standpoint instead of a nutrition standpoint. So it's how do we fill bellies, right? And I think from an equity standpoint, I think we want to think about not just how we're filling bellies, but what is the nutritional value and what is the effects that is going to have on that body with the food that we give them. And then there's one last thing. And then there's also the career components of it. So this is something that's really near and dear to us because school food operators that's who that's our people. Those are our stakeholders. And when you are just taking frozen chicken nuggets out of a freezer, putting them in a retherm and putting them on a line, you do not have a lot of value in the workforce, one, and you're not building skill set or seeing the value in your position. So career development is pretty important. Now we can go. Thank you. So I want to just talk about really quickly the state of the nation on school food reform. There are 30 million lunches served daily in America, and that number has fluctuated over the last couple of years because we saw some pretty big increases over the pandemic. But traditionally, of those 30 million lunches, about 70% of them have been served to kids who are on the free and reduced lunch program. What we saw during the pandemic is that we saw a huge increase in kids needing access to school lunch. So I think if you guys remember back to the beginning of the pandemic when schools closed, what we started hearing was, where are my kids going to get their food? They get their food at school. Where are my kids going to get their food? And what I think people didn't understand is that people thought school lunch was a nice to have, not a I need to have it or I'm not going to eat. So that piece, I think, became a reality. And the other thing is that during the pandemic, we had free lunch waivers through the federal government. And what we saw nationally is we saw in some places an increase in participation by up to 30%. And the reason why is if you look at the free and reduced lunch program, it is it's connected to families that earn less than $52,000 a year for a family of four. And I think what we know in a lot of areas that there is a lot of need for families who earn $60,000 or less a year, $70,000 this year. We're missing a lot of kids in this program. We also saw huge labor and supply chain issues coming out of COVID that have really come to light. The average reimbursement rate is currently $4.30, and that has increased through the pandemic, and that's still not very much. You can think even 40% of that is what districts have to spend on the food. So think about about $2 that you spend on food costs and what you can do with that. Child nutrition reauthorization is the governing legislation over our school food program, and it was last reauthorized in 2010. It's supposed to be reauthorized every 5 years, and because of partisan politics, we have not been able to reauthorize it. We thought we were going to get there this year, and it does not look like it's going to happen again. And there are some big changes that need to happen in this policy. Most recently, our president prioritized nutrition and health through having the first White House conference on hunger, nutrition, and health in over 50 years. Out of that has come some pretty significant kind of challenges to the nation and support from the USDA about increasing the nutrition of food. One of them is coming through the Healthy Meal Incentive Program that is under the USDA. And this is a $100 million program that the USDA is instituting to help districts serve healthier food, to help create better supply for healthier ingredients, to work throughout the system, through the supply chain, to ensure that we have that we don't have some of the issues we ran into during COVID. And then lastly, probably the most significant thing we're seeing is, child nutrition advocates have been asking for universal free meals. Instead of having that cut off, we believe that meals should be free to all kids in schools, just like math books are, just like buses are, that it's a needed part of the day. You cannot thrive and meet your potential without proper nutrition, and we shouldn't be charging kids for food. And this has been something we have been pushing for. And I think the pandemic, with the increase in participation, really pushed for this. Because the federal government is not really willing to engage in free meals for all at this point, we're starting to see states pass different budgetary acts and legislation to do it. And actually, Massachusetts is one of them that has done that for this school year, which is really exciting. So and if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see this is a map from an organization called FRAC that really shows states that have passed some policy in the 22-23 school year on providing free meals for all. That's the green states. Then the blue is the ones that have passed permanent policy, and the kind of, I guess, orange circle-ish is the ones working to pass permanent legislation. So this is really exciting. And states like California was the first state to pass permanent policy for universal free meals, or they call it healthy school meals for all, which I love. And already they are seeing in some districts 20% increase on average daily participation over the already increased pandemic participation numbers. So we know kids need this, and it's really exciting. And I think what's happening, what you can see through this map, is that where the federal government decided they weren't able to push this, we're showing states that are taking charge and moving this forward. And I think it's really excited. One of the Colorado, where I'm located, I grew up in Massachusetts, but I'm currently located in Colorado. And that Healthy School Meals for All was just passed by ballot measure. It's the first state to pass it by ballot measure, which is really a good sign for future legislation. And that's it. I just want to say thank you. There's so much more. I could, Smitha knows I could talk for hours on school lunch, but I'm excited to hear from Mellissa about what's happening on the ground.
Thank you, Mellissa. Thank you, Maura, for setting that context, right? From policy, what needs to happen at the country level, at the state level, at the local level. Sometimes it's invisible, and your content and the data and details that you've shared just allows us to kind of see who the key actors are and gain a systemic perspective of school food lunch. Let me turn it over to Mellissa to now take it to the local level. Thank you, Mellissa.
Thank you all so much for having me. And yes, thank you, Maura, for the wider introduction to school meal complexities. I'll try to give a bit more of a granular level experience-based description of what we have found here in Cambridge. I like to think that Cambridge is very special, but we are not unique in our struggles or our accomplishments. So as you'll see on the next slide and throughout the slides that I have here, there'll be logos at the bottom of each of my slides with various partners that I've worked with during my tenure with Cambridge Public Schools, because this is such a large and complex system. It really does take a village to create change. And so you'll be noticing the logos of different partner organizations that I've worked with to kind of bring Cambridge where we are now and who we are partnering with to move ourselves forward. But first, I'd like to give you a little bit of context for who we are in Cambridge. Here's a brief snapshot of some information, just so if you're referencing your particular school district, this can show you some comparison. We have 18 schools in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in our public school system, but they're only in 13 buildings. We have some schools that share campus. There's just under 7,000 students enrolled in the public food program. And for my department, I manage the Food Nutrition Services department, and we have just around 70 employees that work at each of the throughout the 13 different school buildings. And that includes administrative staff, cashiers, cafeteria workers, kitchen staff, as well as a storekeeper and driver who helps us move stuff throughout the district. One thing that is a privilege that we have in Cambridge that is not always the case out in many school districts is that we have the equipment and infrastructure to do on-site meal preparation in all of our school buildings. And so we may not do full scratch cooking. We're not baking our own bread, but we do speed scratch, in which we are cooking our raw proteins. We are taking in farm fresh produce. We are doing preparation on site for the end product of the meals that we are trying to produce. We also are extremely privileged that one of the partners that we've had that predates my joining Cambridge Public Schools is with a program called City Sprouts, which is an educational garden program where all of our K-8 schools have a garden on site where they get to where the garden is used as a learning space for various curricula, whether it's history, science, English. They are using the garden as a learning space and as kind of a template for other lessons that they are trying to learn within the school day. And so they are learning that through a food lens. And that's fantastic for me because the students that I'm serving my food to, they understand the life cycle of food. They have a bit more experience in the food system and what it takes to take food from a seed and the work that it takes to nurture it until it produces a plant and produces a food. So I have some budding food justice advocates that I get to serve each day. And that's a great resource for me to have the students aware of what it takes to actually produce the meals that they get to see. And I'm going to give you, I'm going to focus in a little bit on something that Maura touched on earlier as far as some of the procurement issues that kind of hold school food service departments in some scaffolding and some of the challenges that we have because of them. So aside from the fact that the USDA gives us nutrition guidelines that we follow, cool, no problem. All right, aside from the fact that they decide how much we get paid for the meals that we serve, all right, yep, that's fine, they can choose to do that. On top of that, there are also, because we are receiving Uncle Sam's dollars for the food that we are served, there are asterisks attached to that. We must spend that money in a very specific way because these are taxpayer dollars. We must ensure that we are following federal, state, and local procurement guidelines to make sure that we are spending the money in a way that is fair and equitable to the vendors that we are seeking to procure from. When I first started in 2012, there was, for Cambridge Public Schools specifically, there was a lot of reliance on city bids. We're part of the City of Cambridge government, we're the public schools, and we would work with the city's procurement department to put out bids on behalf of the Cambridge Public School District. That was a good amount of how, that represented a number of the bids that we put out. So that was for milk, procuring bread, procuring grocery items, procuring equipment repair, et cetera, all the things that you need to run a kitchen. We did have also some heavy reliance on state contracts. So these are contracts that are written for the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts for, say, restaurant equipment. And so this would be restaurant equipment for state penitentiaries. This would be restaurant equipment for hospitals. This would be restaurant equipment for daycare centers, et cetera. Any organization within the state that needs to procure kitchen equipment, it may be on the state contract. Occasionally, the city would participate in buying collaboratives where they would partner with other local municipalities and create a bid. And they were grossly underutilizing the USDA foods program, which some of you may know as commodity foods, in which the USDA uses their buying power to procure goods, whether that is fresh produce through the DoD foods program, whether that is brown box commodities. Some folks may be familiar with that, where it is end products that the USDA has purchased for schools to procure, or whether that is processed commodities. When I first started in 2012, there was hardly any processed commodities occurring in the state of Massachusetts because it wasn't up to the food service directors how to utilize their USDA dollars. It was actually set with a lot of influence at the state level. And they were going through some transition when I first came aboard. And so a lot of it was coming from the state of how individual districts could utilize their funds. And frankly, it was not set up in a way that was convenient or easy to understand for food service directors. You had to, I'll give a small example. You had to request the products that you were going to use in pounds instead of in dollars. And that's very hard for somebody who's a food service director to try to figure out how you want to budget the food that you're going to be using for the upcoming year, because you look at your assets in dollars and in cases, not in pounds. So it took a lot of translation to try to make use of the USDA foods program. Fortunately, fast forward 10 years later, I am now strategic in how we use city bids for vendors. So I rarely seek contracts through the city of Cambridge because one, Cambridge, we think we're very special. And there are lots of very unique rules applied to Cambridge as far as different rules and regulations that vendors must follow in order to do business with us. But we're also not that big. Even though we serve 7,000 students, it's hard for me to write a spec for a very specific food item and hope that I would get business, because we are a small but very urban school district. It is notoriously difficult to drive around through the city. I'm not blaming the students of Harvard, but I'm not blaming the students of Harvard for walking in the middle of the street and making it difficult to parallel park or receive deliveries. But our buildings are also old. We are in the city that has the oldest university in the country. We also have some of the oldest infrastructure in the country. And so getting in and out of our buildings is a challenge for people driving 14-foot box trucks and trying to go up and down stairs and questionable elevators. So not a lot of vendors want to do business with us because it's difficult to get around. Schools are only open certain hours of the day, which is prime traffic time. And while we may be consistent, we also have 3 months of no business over the summer. So we're not always the most attractive to larger scale distributors. So a Cisco and Aramark, broadline food distributors, they're not going to go out of their way to change their style of business for a small city like Cambridge. However, I'm being strategic in how I use my city bids for smaller businesses. For example, if I put out a bid for tofu, there's a great vendor in Jamaica Plain, not too far from Cambridge, that an old family, that 21st Century Foods, they're a fantastic homemade tofu producer. If I put that out through the city of Cambridge, it's a little bit more competitive for smaller vendors like 21st Century Foods to actually compete. We also are very fortunate that there is an institution called Mayflower Poultry, where if I'm asking for fresh, raw, halal chicken, I know that Mayflower Poultry just down the road happens to have it. If I put that out there, that I'm looking for somebody with the best price, their delivery cost is going to be lower than it would be for most broadline distributors. And we're able to form that partnership by working with the smaller vendors that are going to be able to outperform some of the larger broadline distributors that are shipping across state lines to really just prop up the partners that we already have closer to home. Another way that I've been creative with our current procurement is that we've increased the amount of small contracts that we have with businesses. So without getting too deep into procurement law, once you plan to spend over a certain threshold, and for Cambridge Public Schools, it's over $10,000, you need to either put out a request for bid or a request for proposal, meaning you have to follow formal procurement guidelines to publicly put out that you are seeking business and seeking contracts for whatever it is you're looking to find. Because we are a mid-sized district for Massachusetts, I am able to create contracts that are under $10,000 for specific items. So, for example, going back again, the tofu that we're able to get from 21st Century Foods, even though we pound through a lot of it, I'm getting it at a more affordable price through 21st Century Foods. And we're able to pick it up to cut down on delivery cost. And so we're saving money that way. It means that even throughout the entire course of the school year, that spending does not exceed $10,000. So I don't even need to go out to bid some years, depending on what our anticipated needs will be. I'm also able to do small contracts with CSA style farm share with certain local farms, because they are too small to be able to meet my produce needs, but we can be strategic about getting the local products that they do have when it's seasonal, when it's fresh, and know that it will stay under $10,000 for the school year and not have to put them through the arduous process of having to respond to a bid. I'm also using larger buying collaboratives for more for products that I know we are going to need to use and that other school districts are going to use similar to us. So for example, we're not going to be walking away from whole grain cereal anytime soon, or brown rice or pasta items. Our pantry items that we know that we're going to be using and other school districts are going to be using as well. We participate in buying collaboratives to increase our purchasing power, so that way we can get better pricing from these broadline distributors that carry this product more readily. Also, some benefit that we've had with our procurement is that we have developed some more autonomy with USDA food acquisition and partnering with the state in giving us a little bit more freedom in how we get to plan our use of USDA commodity foods and the way in which we are able to communicate our needs to the state and beyond. We can go to the next slide. And I believe you may be able to click and there should be photos that will advance through here. I'm not sure if the animation will work. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, that may have gotten lost in translation, but the procurement evolution that we've had in Cambridge has set us up to have more of a food justice evolution in Cambridge, because we were able to change who we are buying from and how we're able to get that food into our district has given us some flexibility in how we are able to craft our menu. And so for me, I've always had the view that the food should reflect the people of Cambridge. And this is probably the case with most folks and most school districts, is that the folks who are working in the school kitchens are from that community. No one gets into school nutrition for the fame or the money. They get into it because they care about the students that they serve and they want to make sure that they're nourished well. And usually it's their own kids or grandkids that they are serving in the schools. And so we've been very intentional about involving the community and investing in the community that we serve. And so part of that is soliciting feedback. When I first started in 2012, there was a parent advisory board where they met semi-monthly to talk about all the issues that they've had with school food services and the changes that they would like to see. It has been one of my crowning achievements that through listening to them and enacting change, they disbanded in under a year. They said, well, looks like you got it going from here. They felt heard, they felt validated. They knew that they were being listened to and that action was being taken. That to me was a tremendous sign of progress. And beyond that parent advisory board, we didn't stop there and say like, well, we have no other means of soliciting feedback. Let's just put our feet up. Nope. We partnered with our community engagement team in Cambridge, where they meet with different families from different backgrounds, whether it's Somali families or Ethiopian families, all the different types of families that come into Cambridge, either through fellowships or through our prestigious universities. Their kids come with them, and we want to make sure that they see themselves in the meals that we serve. So through the community engagement team, as they're going over the experience of students that they have while attending school, we ask them to check in with the families and say, hey, are there any recipes that you would like to see offered in the school meals? And we have had tremendous success and feedback from families who have contributed recipes from their own personal repertoire that we've been able to bring in, try out, modify slightly to fit the school nutrition preparation and nutrition standards, while still maintaining authenticity to the recipe itself and to the culture that it's representing. And through the International Taste Testing Program, we've been able to really fold in a lot of new recipes that represent the various cultures of Cambridge. And some of the more successful ones include a lovely chicken biryani recipe. We got a sofrito recipe that we were able to partner with a local farm to grow some cacao. So that way we were able to make the sofrito and do a stewed chicken that way. We've had a Haitian legume, we've had Chinese tomato and tofu. Just the recipes are all tremendous. And we we didn't add these items to kick other items off the menu. We did it to expand it. And so Maura said earlier that she hasn't been to a school district that didn't offer chicken nuggets. I've managed to get away for the past 10 years to not offering a chicken nugget, and nobody's called me on it except for this one second grader named Mary. She asked me about it a few years ago, but that was it. She was appeased by the fact that we had other items. It's not about taking food away from students, but broadening the spectrum of what is available to them. Because when you make the rest of the food attractive, you're not missing out. It's offering a wider variety. And so when we are soliciting the feedback from the students, we are getting the recipes that they want to see anyways. And in all the feedback that I've gotten from students, no one has ever requested that, besides Mary, that we reinstitute chicken nuggets. They want to see food that represents what their parents cook, what their grandparents cook, because that's what they eat at home. And in order to implement these new recipes that we were getting from families, it was very important to me to make sure that our staff felt supported, because while they are also represent the various cultures of Cambridge, they were going to have to do some cross-pollinating of different styles of cooking. And so I more than tripled the amount of in-house training that we had available for our food service staff, and made sure during our latest round of union negotiations that they were able to receive an increase of pay because of the increase of raw and fresh produce that we were getting from local farms. They're working harder to produce fresher food, so we want to make sure they're compensated for it. So like I said, our staff are not the highest paid, and no one gets into the industry for the food or the money. So we want to make sure that they know that we see their skill set as an investment back into the community, and that they should be compensated for it. Because it's not food justice if my staff are also reliant on free and reduced price meals for their children, rather than lifting them up and being able to support themselves and support their families to be able to seek additional continuing education. And so that's been a really key investment from our perspective, to make sure that our staff know that they are valued, because at the end of the day, I can have all these tremendous ideas and we can get all this great feedback from the community, but if we don't have skilled workers who are able to execute it, it's all theoretical. And so we can move ahead to the next one. And how this kind of plays into food equity is, Maura touched upon this a little bit earlier in her slides, but prior to the pandemic, had to apply for free and reduced price meals. So they had to prove to their school district that they needed free meal benefits based on need. This is the only part of the school day where services are provided based on need, and it is determined exclusively by your family income. They never ask for your income if a student has any special learning needs, or they never ask for income based if you're, depending on where you live and how to get to school. They never ask for your income needs if your child needs a little bit more direction in a certain subject. It's only with providing school meals do you have to prove that you need it as part of your public school education. And as many of you have probably seen or recognized on the screen, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that we can't expect our students to achieve cognitively if we are not meeting their baseline biological and physiological needs of making sure that they are well nourished. I feel like you can see this on display acutely if you ever go to a grocery store right before dinner time and you see people making frantic choices right before they're about to eat because they are hangry. My favorite saying, well, I'm not the one who coined it, it's one that I like to share freely, is that hungry students eat teachers. My wife is a teacher and she sees this firsthand. If you have students who are not well nourished, they are not able to learn, and it is going to manifest in ways that are not productive within the classroom. And so I don't see the end product that we put out in Cambridge as food on a plate. It is well-nourished students ready to learn. And that should be something that is available for all students. There are some programs that exist nationally to try to mitigate to try to offer free meals to more students, such as the community eligibility provision or provision 2, but these are a Band-Aid compared to what universal free meals was during the pandemic and what we were able to offer by having it just be universally accepted that free meals are a fundamental right for students and is an essential part of learning. During the pandemic, it was proven that it is possible and that we are capable of doing that. Our essential workers were able to provide these meals, and I know it only cost $11 billion annually. You can read many articles about what the government also chooses to fund for $11 billion, which is just a pittance compared to the overall national spending. But it's just that small of an investment to make sure that free meals would be available for all students, for just making sure that kids aren't hungry, not just for the school day, but because it is a basic need. And as Maura has mentioned earlier, some states have continued to free meals in various ways, whether permanently or in a patchwork of legislation. But my hope and the hope of these various organizations who've been really at the forefront trying to advocate for food equity is to make sure that no child should have to prove their need of a free meal as part of their educational process.
Thank you, Mellissa, for sharing the details about the Cambridge School District program. I am a Cambridge resident myself and get to engage with community from events at the park, events being led by the mayor, and school food does come up as a positive experience in our town. So thank you for everything that you do to making our students and community stronger and better. With that, I'm gonna, so you've heard the little bit of the broader horizon, right? Policy at the federal level, state level. You heard from Mellissa from the Cambridge, the town and local level. Now we will turn it over to Sunny, who is our food literacy project fellow and leads the Food Lab for Kids program.
Thanks, Nissa. Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Sunny and I'm a junior at Harvard and I actually study chemistry here. So I'm also the president of a volunteer organization called the Food Lab for Kids, and it consists of Harvard College undergrad students that teach cooking classes at local community centers for sort of Cambridge area elementary and middle school students. So after hearing from Maura and Mellissa about all the work that they do directly in the school lunch sphere, I just wanted to briefly share how students at Harvard are engaging with K through 12 students and sort of education surrounding food. So on this page, or Gwen, you can stay on the previous page, but so here's our sort of mission statement. So we aim to engage young students in sciences through the lens of cooking, and we really also focus on teaching, cooking as a means to achieve or aim for a healthy and very nutritious lifestyle. So the Food Lab started in 2015 as sort of an extension of actually a course at Harvard called Science and Cooking to sort of bring those concepts to a younger audience. And over the past, I would say, so it's been like 7 years now. So over the past several years, our educational mission has really grown to encompass not only just food science, but also to teach about nutrition and healthy eating. So currently we have around 40 active volunteers, mostly Harvard undergrad students who teach 5 classes at different community centers during the week. So we have a long-standing partnership with the Cambridge Youth Centers, where we teach during the week as part of their after-school programs. And we also work with Charles River Community Health Center across the river in Alston as part of their, I think, Fitness in the City or Healthy in the City program. There we teach these virtual cooking classes for their youth patients who are overweight or potentially at risk for obesity. So during those classes, usually their families and parents and sometimes older siblings, younger siblings also attend. And we focus on really developing recipes that they can sort of incorporate into their daily cooking and daily eating habits, for ranging from like breakfast, lunch, dinner to just snacks or also dessert. So on this slide and on these slides that you can see over here, these are just some pictures from the cooking classes that we held over Zoom during the pandemic, because we wanted to, keep on engaging with young students in this area, despite, not being present on the Harvard campus. So you can see, so I think on the previous slide, it was like, we made these banana, sort of ghost bananas for Halloween with these chocolate chip eyes. And then on the next slide, you can see on the left, we did these veggie boats. I think some of the kids have either like cucumber or peppers that they stuffed with either cream cheese or some hummus, and then decorated it with different shapes of like carrots or whatever vegetable that they wanted to cut out. And then on the right over here, this was actually a recipe that we did for St. Patrick's Day. And we did this green eggs and ham, though potentially it might not have had ham, but it was just green eggs and sort of toast that we did this cut out sort of a hole in the toast. And then we actually just added, I think food coloring in this case, green food coloring to the egg white to sort of create that like fun look. Next slide. So here's just a sample recipe of that we like to use for the classes that we teach. So here, this was written by some of our volunteers and developed by them. I think this was April 2022, so last semester. And this is a recipe for popcorn cauliflower. You can see that usually we write the complete recipe, and then also include this brief lesson that consists of usually a lot of different interesting sort of tidbits of information about sort of the theme sort of ingredient of that week. So here it was cauliflower, so there's some sort of like history, and then there's also some information about plant-based food alternatives. And finally, we also usually during our classes, we like to incorporate some sort of interactive activity with the kids that we work with. So in this case, it was sort of this 2 truths and a lie sort of game that we played. And since it was on April Fool's Day, so it was really perfect. And I think we can go to the next slide now. So I think this is the last slide, but here's just a picture from last semester, the classes that we taught at Charles River Community Health. So for that session, we actually held sort of, I would say like a hybrid version of the classes, where for the first 3 weeks, the kids would take the classes on Zoom with their parents. And then for the final week, we had an in-person class with a graduation, sort of a mock graduation ceremony. So you can see all the students that we worked with holding these certificates that we gave to them, and you can also see some of their parents. And I think in the middle, sort of in the back row, you can see me and then 2 other volunteers from the food lab. So I just wanted to end off with sort of what I feel like a very important part of our mission is. So I feel very strongly about the interdisciplinary nature of sort of like food and the food system. And I've found it really food as a very powerful way to sort of introduce kids or introduce anyone to sort of new subjects or new different areas, and spark interest in sort of in new subjects, but also serve as an avenue for you to pursue and learn about your current interests. So it's just it's really amazing to me how you can really learn about many different things just through the lens of food. And that's something we really try to incorporate in the lessons and in the classes that we teach for the students that we work with. And it's always really wonderful to hear, the feedback from the students that, they really love the recipe and would love to make it at home. Sort of like being, sort of like telling us like what they enjoy cooking at home and like things that they made and giving us suggestions and telling us sort of what they enjoyed and like if they found something interesting during the lesson that we taught. And really through my time volunteering with Food Lab, I've been very impressed by, how much the students that we work with really know about food and how they're really interested in learning about sort of like the food preparation process and sort of all the other information, sort of all the sort of educational content that we want to engage them with. And yeah, I think this is sort of, it's been a really wonderful opportunity for me to volunteer with Food Lab and sort of serve as president now. And yeah, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to just share what we do with everyone here today.
Thank you, Sunny, for that overview. And the use of animation, right, that you incorporate, I think is another part that attracts students, especially with the math and such. We have a few minutes. We may be able to take in one or two questions. Let me turn it over to Gwen to lead the Q&A portion.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. This has been such a terrific conversation. So thank you, Maura and Mellissa, for typing out some responses in the Q&A. That's been really helpful as we go along. I saw a lot of questions come in. So I just want to make sure that, yeah, I think we've touched on all of those that are in there. We still have a couple of minutes if folks want to type in their questions. But I have a question here. So what are some of the, and you touched on this a bit, but what are some of the policies that can be implemented to improve K-12 food, and what steps can someone take on an individual level to contribute? For anyone that would like to answer.
I'm sorry, Gwen, can you repeat that question? I was typing an answer to someone and
that's okay. So what are some of the policies that can be implemented to improve K-12 food? And what steps could someone take on an individual level towards improvement? Yeah, Mellissa or Maura.
I can take a first stab at that. I think the first approach that I would recommend is visit your school, talk to your food service director. Actually see what is currently happening. You might be surprised, because if you were to do a Google image search of school lunch or lunch lady right now, it is egregious as far as what you would see. And it's usually worst case scenario thinking. But like I said, the work that we do in Cambridge, I know that we're special, but we're not unique. There is great work happening throughout the country. So it is worth going to your school district, actually sitting down, seeing what is happening in your district and talking to the people who work there to find out from them, what are the roadblocks that you're encountering, or what is it that you're hoping to do? Because I guarantee there's no food service director sitting in a fancy office twiddling their mustache thinking about how they can serve the worst possible food to students. Nobody gets joy out of that. They are trying to figure out how to serve the best meals possible. And it may be an advocate like you, somebody from outside the food service department, advocating with them to say, hey, we need to invest in infrastructure. Hey, we need to invest in training. Hey, we need to pay our staff more, whatever the roadblocks may be. I feel like going in and learning what's happening in your school and your district is a great first step, because they may already have the ball rolling and making some policy changes, and they need individuals and citizens and constituents to back them up and to be another voice in the chorus.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Mellissa. And I just posted a link that maybe Gwen can post somewhere. I don't know where. But one of the, so I was a parent who was very upset with our school food program in Boulder Valley in Colorado. And I had just moved from Roslindale. I lived in Roslindale in Boston, and I worked in Cambridge. And I got to Boulder thinking I was like going to the greener pastures of all food things, and it was not the case at all. And so I was one of those parents that kind of started trying to connect with my school food team at the district and the administration. And from that, and the work I've done with a lot of parent groups across the country, we actually created this parent advocacy toolkit that there's a link to. One of the things that we see, and the big mistake I made, I think to Melissa's point, is I went in there without any knowledge. And so I think the biggest thing that you can do is understand what school food teams are, what their challenges and obstacles are, what's the infrastructure they're working within, so that when you go in and try and have a conversation with them, or you're thinking about what kind of changes you want made, you have the context of kind of what they're up against. And this school food advocacy toolkit is a really good, it kind of takes you through the get educated process, kind of the get your thoughts together on kind of what you feel you want to see the changes in, and then kind of how you work with your district to create change. But the big part of it is understanding what your school is actually serving.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. We are a little after 5:30, so we'll go ahead and close out. Thank you everyone for attending and for your participation and engagement, all your great questions. Thank you so much, Maura, Mellissa, Sunny, Smitha, for being here this afternoon. Stay in touch with HFSI events coming up in the spring semester by visiting hfsi.harvard.edu. And we wish everyone a great end of the semester and holidays, and we will see you all in the spring. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.